He woke to the city like a man who had nowhere left to hide. The penthouse windows bled morning light across expensive rugs and a life built from chance and choice. He moved through the silence like a practiced actor. Coffee, newspaper, the hollow rituals of a man everyone called a winner. Inside, the walls were soundproof to more than noise. They were soundproof to truth. She opened the door without knocking. Her hair was braided, her shoes scuffed, her eyes carrying urgency. "Please," she said. He looked up as if surprised to find anyone there. "Who are you?" he asked. "Don't go outside today," she said. "Please don't go outside." "Your wife is planning to." She stopped. He laughed, soft and private. "Planning to what?" "She's planning to make a scene. She wants cameras. She wants proof. She'll ruin you in front of everyone." Her hands clenched the strap of her bag. "I overheard her. I work in her building. She thinks I'm invisible, but I listen." He measured her. The world had trained him to turn accusations into paperwork and apologies into press releases. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I don't want anything from you. I just don't want you hurt." He moved to the window. Down on the avenue, people flowed like music. She followed, small and determined. "Tell me." She told him the late-night whispers, the names of men hired to create a scandal, the way the wife spoke about teaching him a lesson. None of the details alone were damning, but together they felt like a plan. He could call lawyers, security, private investigators. He could stage decoys and prepare statements. Or he could do nothing and let the story happen. He had always had options. "Why come to me?" he asked. "Aisha," she said. "Please. My little brother is sick. If I can stop this, maybe." Her voice broke. "I just don't want him to get hurt." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a card. "This is a job offer, not charity. Help me today, and there will be money for the hospital." She blinked. "I didn't come for money." "No," he said. "But money makes things possible." She took the card. "I will help." They improvised. He arranged an alibi. She knocked on doors and begged favors. They relied on the city's small kindnesses: a borrowed van, a spare room, a vendor who remembered a favor. Their greatest weapon was unpredictability. Neighbors, a child with a phone, people who remembered that kindness had cost him little and meant a lot. The wife moved with precision. Designers, photographers, a staged fury. The tabloids smelled blood. She stood on the sidewalk, perfect and prepared, and the cameras obeyed. From a hidden room, he watched the crowd swell. A paid witness shouted about betrayal. The wife painted him as the villain. Then a girl's voice rang out, clear and unwilling to be swept away. "That's a lie," she cried, brandishing a phone. The little girl ran forward with shaky videos. One of the wife with a man, another of timed messages, a series of clips that did not show his guilt but suggested a setup. Shopkeepers and a security guard stepped up, remembering scholarships he had quietly funded, a mechanic whose wife's surgery he'd covered. The chorus shifted the cameras from spectacle to confusion. The wife's composure cracked. Her hired men melted back. She retreated, promising retribution, but the day's narrative had changed. The tabloids had their moment and moved on, hungry for the next headline. Back in the penthouse, after the cameras dispersed and videos spread online, he turned to Aisha. He felt something unexpected, wetness behind his eyes and a weight that no ledger could balance. "You saved me," he said. She shrugged. "You didn't listen, but I'm glad you're alive." He placed a thick envelope on the table. "For your brother." "For the hospital." She hesitated, then took it. "I don't like taking things like that," she said. "But we need it." "Help me clean up the rest," he said. "Help me stop this from happening again. Help me learn what money can't buy." She smiled. "I don't know your world. I know people. People remember." They began to act not with press releases, but with small, honest measures. Pay the janitor's rent, fund the neighborhood clinic, create a scholarship for polite kids in the elevator. These gestures were meant to stitch a life torn in public back together in private. The wife's next moves were quieter and crueler in smaller ways. But she had learned a cost. When you try to make an entire neighborhood your enemy, you risk their stubborn memory. The cameras chased other flames, and the wife found herself unmoored by truths that did not bend under pressure. He remembered how his marriage had frayed, not in a single explosion, but in quiet withdrawals from trust. He thought of the first time he'd brought Aisha a coffee under a storefront awning and how her refusal to meet his eyes had stayed with him like a small moral coin he almost dropped. Aisha's life had been lived on the margins, a mother who worked nights, a brother who coughed too often, the daily economies of care. She listened because listening kept the world from folding people into anonymous corners. When she said she had overheard the plan, it made sense. She heard the wife's late-night calls, the offhand mentions of making it public, the way favors were bought like theater props. The wife moved with curated perfection. For her, spectacle was a business tool. Hired witnesses, staged confrontations, a publicist to script indignation. Aisha had no publicist. She had neighbors, a teacher who ran bake sales, a vendor who'd share a day's earnings. Her evidence was raw. Shaky videos and the testimony of people who remembered quiet kindnesses from years before. When the staged spectacle collapsed into confusion, it was not a single hero but a chorus. Shopkeepers who remembered scholarships, a security guard who had been quietly helped, a child with a phone who showed the pattern of lies. The cameras pivoted away from spectacle because real people, with real memory, refused to play the script. Afterward, he acted quietly. He arranged temporary work for the fired witness, paid overdue rent without announcements, and funded the clinic's small repairs. He learned to do things without a press release. Envelopes slid over counters, checks given with names and promises rather than photo ops. He started sponsoring vocational classes for teenagers because power without opportunity felt empty. Aisha used the envelope for the tests her brother needed. The doctor prescribed a regimen that slowly improved him. The neighborhood organized a small, necessary economy. A hairdresser donated cuts, a teacher ran a bake sale, a vendor put aside a day's worth of pretzels. These were not headlines, but they were salvation. The wife's next moves grew smaller and crueler. Charity with strings, whispered insinuations, but the bridge the man had built to the neighborhood was hard to burn. People remembered who paid a child's school fees, who fixed a roof, who quietly helped after a storm. Influence dependent on spectacle has limits. Collective memory is stubborn. He spent nights examining the ledger of his life. Deals and donations, favors and negligence. He made mistakes trying to be better, awkward gifts, misdirected checks, but he persisted. Presence mattered more than proclamations. He learned names of nurses, practiced small talk in waiting rooms, and sat with people he had once deemed invisible. Months turned into a routine of small repairs and steady funding. The clinic's waiting room smelled of coffee and the consistent hum of machines. The little brother grew steadier and began to go to school full-time. Aisha finished night classes and took a job at the clinic, learning to count pills and comfort patients. The man hosted community meetings where neighbors proposed practical fixes, a rotating emergency fund, a list of trusted tradespeople, scholarship applications. The wife's magazine still printed glossy pages, but she found fewer allies on the streets. The man had fewer enemies among the people he had overlooked. That was a quiet victory, one without fireworks, but with durable consequences. One autumn afternoon, he walked the block where Aisha had grown up. A woman at a thrift stall pulled out a coat he'd once paid to have mended and tossed it over his arm in thanks. He sat on a bench with Aisha and spoke about classes and her mother, about the awkward lessons he'd been learning. She listened and then said, simply, "Just keep doing it. Don't let the headline decide who you are." He promised. The pledge was small and also the hardest to keep. He still negotiated deals that changed industries, but he also fixed roofs and sat in waiting rooms. He learned the value of humility practiced in private and of generosity that did not seek acknowledgement. Spring came, and with it a community barbecue in front of the clinic. Children chased each other around folding tables, and a volunteer band played joyful music. The little brother, leaner and laughing, raced past with a paper plane. The man stood off to the side, watching a life he'd thought he owned become something shared. People greeted him without complicated calculations. Their smiles were steady. The wife continued to circle in glossy pages, offering curated apologies that lacked honest repair. Her campaigns sometimes flared, but they rarely stirred the neighborhood because the community had built new rituals, a fund, a Saturday clinic, an after-school program. Those rituals could not be bought with an ad campaign. Aisha leaned on the clinic window and said, "This is enough for now." He nodded. He had been schooled by one desperate plea, a girl's courage to say, "Please don't go outside."